I was getting these texts too and these calls, people saying, please help me. My family and I are in danger. Like, I'm here, get me out. And at the time, I had no idea what to do, really. I had no idea. I didn't even know that the Task Force Pineapple existed. But I had one guy's name's Mustafa. He helped us a lot with our business licensing and things like that. And he was just begging me every day, like, please help, please help. I had no idea where to turn. I had no clue. I Googled, I did everything I could to figure out how to get this guy out. I ended up doing a bunch of paperwork, right? Like the USCIS paperwork. I filled out all these things. Handed over all my information. He went silent for a while, and I was like, shit, man. Like he's toast. Like, cause he was helping out US forces over there. He's toast. And then just randomly about 6 months later, he calls me. He's like, I made it, man. Like,
thank God.
Your paperwork you did helped out. And I was like, really? I had no idea. And if I would have known that there was another mechanism, I would have been like, hey, Scott, what do we do, man? Like, help me.
Yeah.
Let me get this guy out.
I get it. And there was no way to know. Honestly, even our group stood up organically, and, everybody was in signal. And it was like, I tell people it was like looking at an evacuation or a catastrophe through a soda straw from 30,000 feet. Like it was all discovery, learning, bumping around in the dark. So, congratulations for getting him out or helping him get out. But I will tell you, imagine what you would have felt if you got a video or a picture of him being killed.
No.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what's happened to thousands of our global war on terror veterans. They they felt exactly what you're like. It all comes down to relationships. And this is where, man, I really hope like what I'm about to say is heard by, I'd love to say it to President Trump's face and anybody else in the administration to help them understand what it is they're walking into, but you got these veterans, these diplomats, others who, like you, who were contractors. Everything we did in that war in Afghanistan and Iraq was based on relationships. In fact, the whole phrase in Afghanistan was Shona Bashona, this Dari phrase for shoulder to shoulder. And it was all a bunch of bullshit, right? When it all came down to it, it wasn't shoulder to shoulder at all. It was like, hold the door, I'm out. And so we bailed on these 20-year allies and we left them to be executed in the dirt. And a whole bunch of veterans and others who had served there, they just weren't good with it. Like, that's not the way our parents raised us. It's not what we were told to do in the deployments. We were held to a standard of you never leave an ally. You eat what they eat. You sleep where they sleep. And all of a sudden now you're just leaving them, because it's time to go. And so you had remember, a lot of these are men and women who had massive injuries, both internal and external. They had struggled to put the war behind them. They did what their country asked them to do. Many of them multiple deployments. They'd lost their families. They'd lost time with their families. They lost limbs. They lost friends. And now these are the guys that have to pick up the phone and the girls, and they're answering the phone and they're staying on the line while, a guy's wife is being tortured at a Taliban checkpoint, being beaten with a rubber hose, and he can hear her screaming. Imagine what that reawakens in these already, fractured individuals who've done so much for the country. And now you're putting this load on them. And now they've also carried it, Nick, for 4 years. They've stayed on the phone. It's like the world's longest 911 call. Yeah. How do you hang up the phone? If Mustafa had stayed on the phone with you and you were sending him, money to pay for a safe house because he can't show his ID, he can't feed his kids. So you're helping him. You're raising money in your church. How do you hang up the phone on him? When do you tell him, I'm sorry, I can't help you anymore? When you have the kind of code that we have, you stay on the watch until properly relieved. And that's what our institutions have done to this. They have put them in, given them the worst moral injury in modern history. And I wonder if this new administration even understands that.
Well, I think that there's a good possibility, more so with Trump than certainly with the other option, because if you look at just the people he surrounded himself with, Pete Hegseth, for example, phenomenal choice. In my opinion, he gets it. I like the idea personally of not having a 4-star general as a Secretary of Defense, having somebody that's kicked down doors in the war that just happened and understands these things.
Yeah, I do too. And don't get me wrong. I think this incoming administration has the propensity to understand. And it's not I'm not saying this because they're tone deaf. I'm saying this because I don't think, I mean, even Pete, like I know Pete and I've actually said this to Pete, but there's Pete and Waltz are about the only ones I know of. There may be a few more who actually lived it and who know what these warriors are carrying. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is that one of the things that at Task Force Pineapple that we're very adamant about and that I'm very adamant about in my body of work is helping this new administration understand that there has been a tremendous amount of trust and broken promises to our own community. And whether you were part of it or not, if you don't own it and set it right publicly, you're never going to get them back. And if you don't get them back, you're not going to get their kids, nephews, and nieces back, which means you're going to continue to have a recruiting and retention problem.
It's such a great point, because when you make that decision to join the military, there is a certain amount of trust that you have to give, right? You have to say, okay, they're not just going to throw my life away. I'm not just going to be disposed of in some war that nobody cares about. Unfortunately, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I was deployed to Iraq as well. I spent a year in Iraq, spent more time there actually. But these last 24 years, I'm like, man, were they meaningless? Did we do anything in this world other than kill some really evil humans that are now, we can talk about what they're doing now, but like, what is your perspective on that? I mean, you talk about moral injury. That has to be a key component of what people are thinking of. What did I just spend my last 20 years doing? Did I just waste my time?
It's a great question, man. It's a great question. And it's a fair question. And I hear it all the time. Remember, we were doing our play Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret before the country fell. And the reason that we were doing it was because I wanted to help Americans understand the impact of modern war, and I wanted to validate and heal those who lived it through storytelling, through theatrical experience.